Welcome to the England Rugby Pod. Thanks for downloading episode 152. Some big results in week 2 of the Rugby World Cup, not least Japan against Ireland. Plus, the Big Mac is back for England's game against Argentina on Saturday. You're listening to the England Rugby Pod, the rugby podcast that believes England will win the World Cup in 2019. Hey guys, welcome back. Another exciting week in the World Cup, and we're going to look at some of those games that resulted in decisions that are being questioned and results that were unexpected. And it's that's all great, but obviously the big game coming up for us is on Saturday, England against Argentina. The squad has been announced, but we're going to go into that in a bit more depth on Saturday. But no doubt there'll be some talking points that we will cover today as well. But more importantly, right now, I'm joined by Dan. Hi, mate.
Morning, mate. How are you?
I'm good. I'm pretty tired. Some early mornings, but all worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hotting up to be quite an interesting World Cup, isn't it? It
is. I mean, like from an English point of view, things going exactly as we would like them to. You know, maximum points. But the two easier games out the way, and now it starts to get a little tougher. So, hopefully England are doing what we predicted that they were going to do. They're going to grow throughout the tournament, and onwards and upwards. But yeah, the tests only become more difficult now. So, this is the real test of what these guys are made of.
Yeah, it's progressively more difficult if you look at our likely opponents moving forward. But
that's a World Cup then.
Exactly. That's what you need to
be the best in the world. You've got to beat the best in the world. And right now, the way things are lying, there's potential for one side of the knockout stages to be a relatively easy run by comparison. I mean, that's probably not fair, but we're setting ourselves up for the more difficult run for sure. But that's a challenge that we relish. We want to get to the top, and there be no questions.
No, I completely agree. But I mean, obviously on Saturday we're going to go into this England team and England match and England's sort of World Cup in a lot more depth. And this one is on midweek, looking more as a World Cup as a whole. And my God, there've been some results, haven't there, out there? Some that are not entirely unexpected, some that are completely unexpected, and it's starting to change the dynamics of what's going to happen come the knockout stages.
It is. Look, before we get into all of that, though, we've had some reviews. We like to read these out, of course, so I'm going to crack on with some of those, and then we will get into the details. First up, we have got Caroline Bruin, who emailed us 5 stars. Or review, 5 stars is the title of the email. She says, "Good morning, chaps. It seemed from the review discussions in your pod that a bit of diversity is required. So here we are, a girl who likes rugby too. I take great pleasure from listening to your dulcet tones as I'm on the tube, laughing like a madwoman at the excellent banter. Off to Japan for the knockouts with my mate Craig. Sorry, Dan, we'll have a beer for you. But we'll continue to enjoy your range of variable predictions and post-match analysis. Fingers crossed you're right on the main one. You're correct on the main one. England for the Rugby World Cup 2019. Keep up the great work, Kaz."
Thanks a lot, Kaz. Look, Caroline, I will stick with Kaz, I think.
That's what she called herself. I think that's probably fair.
Exactly. Yeah, thanks a lot, Kaz. And again, why does everybody else seem to have tickets to these knockout stages? And you better have that beer for me. I'm glad to hear you enjoy Andy's dulcet tone and my zippy like sound as it's been described many times. Don't mug
yourself off.
Oh yeah, well, am I going to say that?
Plenty of people doing that for you.
Oh, good. Great, thank you.
Yep, that's awesome. Another 5 stars from Airborne FF. He has been in touch before, but he says, "Still loving the pod. Feels a bit weird that there's only 4 or 5 episodes left. You should try and organise post-World Cup celebration for the podcast listeners." That's certainly an option. We will definitely look into that. But more importantly, loving that you're still with us, Airborne FF. Keep up the good work. We've heard from our old friend Wade again.
Thanks, Airborne FF.
The 5 stars remain. The high watermark, I don't really understand the title, But there we go. He says, gentlemen, aloha from old Alenians RFC. Things are going swimmingly. 10 points, few injuries, and no serious games under the belt. Now it gets serious. England will beat Argentina. I will put your Southwest London mortgages, Balham, on it. Bit weird. Bit weird. I mean, we don't live in Balham, but not far away. Bit weird that he knows that much. Makes me wonder if perhaps we do know this person.
Yeah.
They really should beat France, but that's never a 100%er. They have Rugby World Cup pedigree and history. You would say that counts for nothing, but they are a proud and historic top 5 World Cup nation. The Asses test then begins. Eddie is either a genius, as you say, or a potential charlatan, as I suspect. England have a soft core of Youngs and Georgie Boy, and the first choice Hinge. Wales or Australia will target them unmercifully. Let's see. I'm, as always, concerned of the lack of huge game experience in the team and gnarled to know how to win tight games on the back foot without quick ball on a plate. Hope I'm wrong, but I wear clear glasses, not the other variety. Hope I'm wrong. Keep it up. Best WD.
Well, as always, Wade, thanks very much.
Just very quickly, I think I would say, and we have pointed this out before, but he's referenced George Ford and then talked about lack of big game experience and the need for front foot ball. But of course, let's not forget that George Ford, was up there with as one of the best players in the Premiership last season, playing off the back of a pack that was going backwards. So I would argue that if we are in a position where we don't have front foot ball, actually George Ford might be the man to help us out.
And he's won a Six Nations Grand Slam as well. I don't think big match experience is a problem for George Ford.
So there we go.
I know he's not specifically just saying George Ford, but no, that's interesting. It's good to have the yin to our yang.
Indeed. Well, moving on from that yin and yang scenario, we have Marcus Warren. He reached out on Twitter. And what did he say? It's on my phone. I should have had it up, ready to go, but I didn't. He says, no, that's the reply. Here it is. Sorry about that. He says, just like to say, lads, I've been listening to your podcast for a year now and I've enjoyed every minute. Keep up the good work because it's been brilliant and come on England. And although he doesn't say it, I feel like there's 5 stars in that.
Excellent. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you. I feel like I'll give us 5 stars for that as well.
Yeah. It's a well-earned 5 stars, so we appreciate that, Marcus. And finally, we have Harry Brickwood. And Harry sent us an email with some quite good questions. I quite like what he's going for with these. So I shall pose these to you, Dan, and see what you think. He says, hi, guys. Love the pod. Can't wait to hear the rose-tinted bias all the way to the final. I've got 2 questions for you that might be interesting now that the matches are heating up. The first one, as we get towards the business end of the tournament, we will start to see our strongest 15. How different does that look to the one you predicted when you started the podcast?
Wow, that's a good question. To answer that fully, I'd need to remember what it was when we started the podcast. I mean, we started the podcast
2.5 years ago.
2.5, 3 years ago, wasn't it? Yeah.
I guess to try and do this quickly, it probably deserves a little more justice. But it's a busy schedule we've got coming up. Who are the guys that perhaps were involved back then that are not anymore? I mean, obviously someone like Good as a potential 15.
Maybe the likes of Danny Cipriani. I don't think Tom Curry was on our radar back then. I'm not entirely sure that Sam Underhill was.
James Haskell, maybe. We probably had Haskell down as he needs to be part of the squad, whether he was a starting 15 player.
Yeah, I think we're talking about... In fairness, I'm not sure that we would have had the likes of Genge, Sinclair.
I think we probably would, wouldn't we?
I can't remember, mate.
He was one of Eddie's finishers. In the early days, you had Gen. So you had Sinclair, George, and Marler as the finishers, with Mako even as a finisher, with Marler, Cole, and obviously captain
Dylan Hartley.
Dylan Hartley at hooker. So in fact, Hartley's probably the biggest name that we would have banked on back then.
Yeah, I would have thought so. Hartley, I think we both, I think, certainly thought would be involved now. That's certainly different. It is a different team, definitely. I think there's still a crux. I don't think we necessarily had at that, certainly to start with. You don't now, but I don't think we had Daly as a fullback.
No, no. I think we probably had Anthony Watson. Well, I think at the time you had Mike Brown at fullback, but with Anthony Watson kind of kicking at his heels, and there was the big debate, wasn't there, about whether Anthony Watson should be the fullback ahead of Mike Brown. And then, of course, Watson got injured. Eddie realised that Mike Brown wasn't the man for the job, and Daly was his option there.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess that probably is where the changes. The Awesome Foursomes remained the same. Billy's obviously remained a constant. Robshaw as well. Haskell, Robshaw, Vunipola was probably what we were looking at back row then.
Yeah, I don't know that we had a back row. I don't know that we thought. I remember us being worried about back row until Haskell Robshaw had sort of a great season. But I remember us to start with being worried, saying we don't have any sevens.
Well, we certainly never had the kind of strength and depth in the back row that we've got now.
Yeah, I said from the start, I said from day one that I thought Lewis Ludlam would be involved, and I got that spot on. Yeah, I got that one spot on. But other than that, I think obviously Billy was there from the start, but on the flanks was fairly new to us. In the centres,
Manu probably was still injured, and probably the expectation was he'd just get injured again. So.
I think we stuck by Manu as I think
it was like we want him. We want him, even if he's only back in time for the World Cup. But it was always a bit of a sort of we haven't really seen him playing since he's been injured. So without him, I guess you were thinking. I mean, were we thinking Ford Farrell at 10-12, or was Farrell the 10?
No, I think we were thinking Ford Farrell.
So therefore,
which it looks like it's gone full circle.
Yeah, Ford Farrell, and Slade. I was hating you, and you were loving. JJ, was obviously looking sharp, and he's back to looking sharp again and making life difficult for Henry Slade. But Henry Slade came good. I just feel like Eddie has done exactly what he needed to do for a World Cup. He's created a strength that didn't exist when he took over. He's got them over to 2015 tribulations and trials, and he's got them pointing in the right direction. And I think. It was almost easier to pick a 15 when we first started because there were less options. And now it's quite difficult to pick a 15 because there are a few different connotations that could arguably be a first 15 depending on who you're playing. Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, well, that's a good one. It's a great question. Second question.
That is, I like that question.
Second question you'll be particularly fond of, Dan. And another great question. If you could choose one player from 2003 to put in this side, who would it be and why?
That's great. I think everyone knows. We'd probably both straight away say Johnny.
I wouldn't.
Naughty. Who would I put? Who would I pick and why?
Well, I'll start then. So, despite our strength there, I would pick John O for his leadership.
So that's a good shout.
Martin Johnson leading this team. That's naughty.
That is big.
And it's a big call to leave Johnny out, but we can only pick one. And I just think we have a lot of talent in the midfield and fly half. Both Ford and Farrell have looked good there. Both of them, Ford's kicking like a Johnny Wilkinson anyway. I mean, he had a couple of bad kicks, but up to that point he was 15 out of 15 or something, and he turned that back round and started kicking well again. Yeah, I think Johnson would add more to this team than Johnny would, if only one could be added in.
Do you know? So if I'm taking Johnny out the equation, because I think I would probably still edge for him. I think Johnny Farrell at 10-12 would be awesome. Then I'm down to another two players who I think would be really good. Both fairly senior players, add for leadership, not in the same way Jono does, but Richard Hill.
Yeah.
I think Richard Hill was an absolute machine, and him at 6, I think, was huge. So,
and he knows the boys because, of course, he's involved.
Yes, true. Richard Hill in his heyday. The other one, Matt Dawson.
I did think one of the things that England really lacks is a world-class scrum half. We probably, no disrespect to Ben Youngs, but it's probably the one area where you wouldn't say that we were world class, despite his 92 caps that he'll get as of Saturday. But then, would you say Dawson was world class? I mean, I guess he won a World Cup, so you've got to argue that he's there or thereabouts. But I don't know. I mean, it's a difficult one for sure. I think again that Johnson adds more to this team, despite the fact that we have plenty of cover in the second row. I think his leadership.
Yeah, Jono was. He's just a different breed of leadership, and I think that leadership actually in this team would be immense. That's a hell of a question. I like that question. Well,
the thing with Jono is that
I'm going Richard Hill.
Fair enough. I think the thing with Jono is that he was respected throughout the rugby world. And sure, you don't need that because as long as the respect exists within your group, but you want the referees to take you seriously. You know, all the talk about Alan Wynne-Jones, I genuinely don't think that he's as good a player as he's made out to be, but it's his leadership and his ability to kind of almost control the narrative a little bit, you know, when the shit hits the fan, that's so valuable. And I think Jono would offer that where Owen Farrell doesn't, because of the various things that people have kicked up a fuss about, in particular his tackling technique, which, to be fair, has been absolutely fine in this World Cup, despite an awful lot of people's tackling technique not being quite so good. But, you know, everyone still refers back to him whenever there's a bad tackle in a game. It's, oh, look, it's a Farrell tackle. But you know, he lacks the kind of the global rugby respect that someone like a Martin Johnson had. And I just think that's really valuable when you're having to win 7 games on the trot and trying to become the world champions.
Yeah, it is huge. That's a great question. I really like that. And Jono's huge. And if it wasn't for the fact that we just had an insane amount of talent at second row,
yeah,
he would be up there for me. But no, I'm going Dickie Hill.
Fair enough. Well, a few good options.
Never
Harry,
call him that to his face.
No, of course. Harry, email us back and let us know your answers to those questions. Well, maybe not the first one, but yeah, let us know who you would pick from the 2003 squad and why. And obviously, to the rest of you guys, if you've got a different opinion to us, if there's someone that we've missed, you know, perhaps a Robinson at fullback wouldn't be too painful.
Well, that's the thing. I was thinking Robinson, and I was just thinking but actually, I think we have more of those flair type players now than we did in 2003.
But get in touch, guys. Let us know what you think at England Rugby Pod on social media, englandrugbypod@gmail.com if you want to ping us an email. But yeah, great reviews there, guys. Really appreciate it. Harry, I can only assume that was 5 stars, my friend. So yeah, let us move on, Dan, because we've got a lot to get through. And the first...
I think I'm going to enjoy this.
The first big game, Japan against Ireland.
I am going to enjoy this.
1912.
Yeah, well done, Japan. Well played,
and I think
Japan.
what's important, I'm sure everyone has seen it by now, but if you didn't see it, I think what's important here is this wasn't an upset in so much as, you know, there was a couple of breakaway tries that just turned the game when it should never have happened. I mean, Japan thoroughly outplayed Ireland for 80 minutes.
Fair play. I saw highlights of the game. I didn't see it live like you. I was out walking the dog. I must admit, I had dismissed this game as Japan being able to beat them, which I apologise to any Japanese fans out there. I didn't think you'd beat Ireland. You did, and well played. So I was out walking the dog, and I got back, and I remember messaging you like, "Are you watching this? I can't believe it." And you're like, "Yeah, I've been up since 5 watching all the games." I was like, "All right, well,
dedicated, mate. We have a rugby podcast that's all about the World Cup, but you know that's neither here nor there."
Well, exactly. But did Japan beat Ireland? So, quick question. Firstly, if there's any Irish fans out there listening, the good news for you is you are currently beating Russia, so well done. And the bad news, or is it bad news? And I want to ask you this, Akers. Are Ireland now done? I know the likelihood is they'll still make the knockout, but are their chance of winning the World Cup over?
Well, statistically, no one's ever won a World Cup and having lost a game. Yeah. So there's that against them. It's very hard to say because it's not like they had a bad day at the office. You know, they've had 2 of them against England Six Nations and then the warm-ups. Frankly, despite their win, they had a bad one against Wales twice, even though they won both.
That's what I mean. Yeah, exactly.
And now they had a good game against Scotland, but Scotland just didn't turn up. And now they've been beaten by Japan. It's not looking great, to be honest. I think, Ireland 2018, peak Ireland.
Well, when they beat New Zealand in Ireland, at that time, they were genuinely probably favourites to win the World Cup at that point.
Yeah.
Now, and I don't, not even talking statistically, I think they'll get through because I think it'll be hard for them not to get through the knockout stages because they'll only lose one game. But I just can't see them getting enough form consistently to win 3 knockout matches and win the World Cup. I think Ireland's World Cup is done and done quite badly.
Yeah, I think you might be right. With that group, I think what's a little bit, well, not necessarily sad, but I think that the last game of the group stages is going to be Japan against Scotland, and it's going to be a knockout match.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a knockout match. And it would be such a shame for Japan, 2 World Cups in a row, to not make the knockouts despite having the same results in terms of wins and losses as those that do. Because they did the same thing in 2015 after they beat South Africa. 3 wins, 2 losses. And then didn't qualify, which is rare. To do it again, it would be heartbreaking for them. And I just think that Japan, the further Japan go in this World Cup, the better for the World Cup. Obviously we don't like to talk too much about it, but the host nation, you want the host nation to stay in it as long as possible because it just makes the whole event bigger and better.
Yeah.
England obviously let everybody down in 2015. They're rectifying that this year. But yeah, it would be amazing to see Japan make the knockouts. And I think brilliant for them, brilliant for World Rugby. So yeah, we will see what happens. But I think I have to agree with you that Ireland, sure, yes, of course, mathematically they can still do it. And they can go all the way and they could win the World Cup. But I don't feel like it's looking very likely. That game... Something I want to ask you about that game. So World Rugby have called out Angus Gardner for getting 3 penalty decisions wrong out of the 9 that were awarded to Japan. Firstly, is it right to call out Angus Gardner because you've got 2 other referees on the pitch in the line judges, and they're mic'd into the referee so they can all discuss things together. And then you've got the guy upstairs or the girl upstairs who's looking at the screens and has the sort of the all-powerful view of things. Is it right to call out the referee who can only see so much? You understand when referees get things wrong, but the fact they've brought in all this extra kind of ability to see more of what's happening on the pitch at any one time. Yeah, firstly, is it right to point the finger at just the guy in the middle? Secondly, is it right full stop? Should World Rugby even be commenting at this stage? It's bad enough the sort of the misunderstandings around tackle technique and the high tackle laws and everything else. But to start saying, "Oh, you got 3 penalties wrong in a big crunch game," surely this is for post World Cup analysis, not for right now.
Yeah, I don't. This is something I brought up the other day, saying about because before the England USA game, there'd been no red cards where there probably should have been, and it was something I brought up saying, there's something that doesn't quite sit right to me about World Rugby just bitching so outwardly about the refereeing and those decisions.
Well, who picked the referees for the World Cup?
Well, exactly. They picked the referee. It stinks of we've all been there where perhaps, be it in bowl work, be it in your professional career, where you work for somebody and, if something goes wrong, all of a sudden, one of the bosses is blaming everyone but themselves. And it just kind of stinks of that where it's, They just don't want to take any responsibility. And what's the value in saying there were 3 decisions wrong? What's the value in publicly
that's exactly what I mean. There are decisions wrong in every single game. And when you're the losing side and the fans of the losing side, you highlight them. That's just the way that this sport works. It's the way that we like to bitch and moan about things. As the fans, that's one thing. But I just think, World Rugby, look, referees, the officials, they need to be held to account. They have a job to do and they're getting paid to do that job. But do it behind closed doors. Don't publicly out them and say you got it wrong. Like, I agree with you. There's no value whatsoever in doing that. It doesn't change anything. All it does is undermine the referees. And what does that result in? What's Angus Gardner going to do in his next game? Is he going to start giving penalties that he shouldn't be giving? Is it going to slow the game down? Is it, what's the impact going to be? Like, how's that going to benefit him in making better calls? I mean, it takes me back again. I go back to the other officials on the pitch. If there are decisions that he's got wrong, there needs to be people to be able to get in his ear and go, actually, no, you got it wrong. Have a look at this.
So, I mean, I can't picture
once
these
the
decisions.
full-time whistle goes, unless it's a citing, and again, that's not World Rugby, that's the Citing Commission. Then I think World Rugby needs to leave it alone. Let the fans bitch and moan about it. If the coaches want to have a bitch and moan, that's on them.
Yeah. So sorry, Heather's just come back, so my dog's getting a bit happy. But carry on.
Bottom line is, I think I think World Rugby have got it wrong once again. I think they need to just wind their necks in a little bit and get back in their box.
I think you put it exactly right when you said World Rugby are a bunch of little bitches and need to shut the fuck up. So just to quote you,
okay.
I think you're spot on with that. I'm with you. I don't really remember these decisions. Do you remember at the time?
I've had a quick look and I got distracted, so I didn't see what the three decisions were, which ones they were. But
you don't remember at the time thinking that's a disgrace.
No, because I just felt like Japan were the team playing the better rugby.
Yeah.
So and maybe that's a problem, but I think if Ireland are trying to blame the way that they're playing at the moment on three decisions made by Angus Gardner on the day, I think they need to take a closer look at themselves, because bottom line is, whether those decisions went the other way or not, and whether the result was any different, it doesn't change the fact that you played like shit.
Yeah, but let's be fair to Ireland. Ireland haven't actually made any complaint, or have they?
Yeah.
I haven't seen anything. I thought it was World Rugby. I didn't realise it was Ireland.
Joe Schmidt made a big song and dance about it, sent off a report, had a whine about the decisions, and World Rugby came back saying, yeah, you're right, he made these mistakes, and kind of outed him as having got it wrong, instead of just saying, we'll file that away and we can talk about it in the post-World Cup review.
Yeah.
Which is what I think they should have done. Anyway, let's move on from Japan-Ireland, because bottom line is Japan beat Ireland in another historic victory, and, all the better. The World Cup is all the better for it. Australia-Wales, this was the next biggie. Obviously, both of these guys, this was a must-win. Not a must-win because they're out of the competition, because they're probably still the two teams that are going to qualify, but in terms of the route that they get to the final. And Wales, obviously, by beating Australia, have put themselves in a strong position to top that group, which would mean that they would avoid us until the final if both teams were to get that far. But this was another one that was kind of marred by controversy. First of all, there was the should he, shouldn't he with the yellow card for the late tackle on Dan Biggar. What's your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on that are
This is obviously Michael Hooper, the captain.
Australian captain. My thoughts on that is I really need to watch that again, because I can't even remember the incident.
Okay, well that's good. It was a late tackle. The kind of the post analysis close up reviews of the whole thing show that he sees the ball being passed, his eyes drift with the ball, so he's clearly aware of it, and then he drops the shoulder, and then he puts in a hit and flattens.
Well, it sounds like a yellow, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it wasn't to the throat or the neck or the head, so therefore he was let off with just a penalty. So that one was pretty bad, but as far as I'm aware, there's been no citing, so even the Citing Commission have decided it didn't warrant a card, although again, maybe this takes me back to the question of would the Citing Commission get involved for a yellow card offence or only for a red card offence?
Yeah, well, we need to check that out.
So, assuming they obviously thought yellow, let's move on. The next one, and far more significant, I think, is the leading forearm. Karevi into Reece Patchell, and Karevi was pinged for leading with the forearm. And Michael Hooper obviously did a bit of a James Haskell and said to the referee, well, what are we supposed to do? Because, Rhys Patchell's, it's poor tackle technique. He's standing too high. He's taking him too high. Have you seen this?
Yeah, I have. It's hard to know. It's so. Do you know what, Michael? It's so hard, especially when you see it in slow motion. I don't think the results of the game change on the back of either of these.
You mean, you say that though, but 25-29, and Australia massively in the ascendancy at that point, and that incident resulted in 3 points for Wales.
Yeah, but then Hooper, if Hooper had been sent off.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying this is one decision that changes the outcome, but I think the issue here is about consistency.
Yeah.
The laws say you can't lead with the forearm. Okay, maybe that's something to look at. And I understand the need for safety, but the law basically says you can lead with the shoulder. So if the defender decides to tackle you the way that Rhys Patchell did, and you go shoulder into his head, Patchell's in the wrong, probably far worse off as well. But because the law says you can't lead with the forearm, because he's holding the ball to his chest, therefore his forearm is naturally in front of him and Patchell goes high, it's a penalty to Wales. To me, it doesn't make sense. And if anything, I would argue that the shoulder to the head is far more dangerous than the forearm to the head.
Yeah, it's a tough one. But, I mean, again, like I said, I don't want us to get caught up too much in all these sort of incidents. How do they change the game?
No. So, Dan, this is not about this particular game. This is about the laws and the way that the referees are viewing them. I'm not talking about that specific incident. I'm talking about the idea that an attacking player can run into a defending player who's taking him too high, and if his arm connects with the defending player, which incidentally about 50% of all tackles seem to do. I mean, following that incident, pretty much every other contact made, the arm of the attacking player was the first thing to hit the defending player. Do we need to start putting a bit more, making it a little clearer what the rules are? Because you can't have defending teams going, well, I'll just stick my body on the line by taking him high, and then we'll win a penalty.
So we probably do, but not now. This needs to be post-World Cup review stuff, I think.
So what do you want to see then going forward? How should referees ref this? England are playing Argentina on Saturday.
Yeah,
okay.
So you're exactly right. I don't have the answer to that. What I want to see is exactly the same as you, just pure consistency.
And what does that look like? So that incident in England against Argentina, Manu Tuilagi takes the ball, he bounces his opposite man, and the reality is that to bounce a player, your arms typically are in front of you with the ball between your arms and your body. But because the player tackling him decides to get in a bad position, he bounces him, but the head comes into contact, Manu goes off.
No, I don't think that's a card. Like, you've got to look at intent as well. If somebody's running and you're leaning into a bounce, it's so difficult. I don't have the answers, is for sure. It has got to be consistent. It's not a red card, but if a ref in a match, if say Manu does have bounces, if a ref in a match and says you can't do that, you're leaving me on penalty against, it's like, okay, I think that's harsh, but then that has got to be the same decision for every single incident like that, especially game by game. I mean, you want it across the board, but I think every single game has to just work on the same ref's decision.
No, I agree with you, but I think it's important to, I'm all for trying to keep things, make the game as safe as possible, but it is a contact sport, and the onus has to be on the safety in the tackle, tackling people safely. You can't do both at the same time. Perhaps in an incident like that, you penalise both sides. I don't know. But I agree with you. Bottom line, consistency, because you don't want to have these games where at the end everyone's pointing the finger. I mean, all the wrong things are being looked at.
Yeah.
Michael Checker. I don't know if did you see any of his post game.
Michael Checker's a bit of a bellend, isn't he?
Oh, a total bellend. But I mean, I read one thing which I thought was quite interesting. It was quite Eddie Jones-esque, I suppose, which was that people basically came back and just said, have you noticed that nobody's talking about the Australian performance?
Yeah, that's very good.
So, is Michael Checker a genius who's just found a way to just completely remove all media away from his team?
I'll answer you now. No, he is not. He's not even nearly a genius.
Is he just a child?
Yes. B. I'm going for answer B for there, please.
As a rugby player, he's embarrassed, and apparently he doesn't know the rules. So, great coach, great selection by Australian rugby there. Okay, well, look, let's move past that one then. This will no doubt continue to rear its head. Let's hope, we've said it before, let's hope that referees don't now go the other way and kind of almost get a bit too free with the old cards just to try and make up for it, because World Rugby keep putting their oar in. But we'll see what happens. England so far have been pretty good in these departments, and we've had some good refs, to be fair. But the next big game was France-USA.
Actually, that's a big one. Sorry, before we go on. As English fans, we can't complain. Both refs in both our games have been brilliant.
Yeah.
So we can't complain yet.
Oh, we're not complaining yet. I think we're preempting that the way that some of these decisions are going, it could change. It could change a game, and it's not just about getting decisions wrong. It's about the key decisions. I think more than anything, it's about the ones that are missed that ultimately get cited, because that happens. That should happen once in a blue moon. We shouldn't be pointing the finger and saying, should he be cited at the end of every game? But anyway, we'll move on, because the next game is France-USA. Our pool.
So this was interesting, because I think you're reading more into. Well, you're definitely reading more into this than I am. But equally, having said that, it's a good point. I mean, France beat the USA. We knew they would, but it was closer than it could have been.
Well, I mean, it was 33-9, and they got a bonus point win. Massively valuable. They kind of needed that just to keep the pressure on England, who were obviously 10 from 2 games. They're on 9. But at 60 minutes, it was 12-9. And the USA at that point genuinely looked like they might do it. Now, in hindsight, having watched all 80 minutes, France eased to victory in the end. And I think the reality is that the USA just didn't have an 80-minute game in them at that level. But France didn't look great. France would have. France basically.
But we know this, don't we?
So this isn't the whole. Which France will turn up. This was. They would have. They would have these.
Are you mugging us off?
Well, no, I'm mugging off the rugby world. France would have these little moments of genius where they'd go, 70 yards, 80 yards, and then meters. And then silly mistakes would result in them losing all that ground, and then 10 minutes later they'd do it again, and then not convert the points. And the USA just did. And to be fair, they did it against England, and they ran out of steam probably a bit earlier than that. England were more clinical when they had opportunities, and France weren't. But France weren't that clinical against Argentina. They weren't that clinical against the USA. The Tonga game is going to be an interesting one, because, I'd argue that Tonga against Argentina put them under the cosh a little bit. And again, although the result was reasonably favourable for Argentina in the end, 28-12, Tonga were unfortunate at the end of the first half. They were definitely on the comeback in the second half. And as we pointed out, they gifted Argentina. I mean, literally gift-wrapped Argentina about 3 of their first 4 tries. So that could have been a very different game if the second half Tonga had started. And I know that, ifs and buts and all the rest of it. But I would argue that this France side has not looked great. To narrowly beat Argentina in the opener, and frankly, they shouldn't have done, because Picamoles was about 12 metres offside. Distance is increasing with every time we talk about it. But yeah, well offside for that interception try. It's true anything can happen on the day, but based on performances to date, I would say that England have got to be feeling pretty confident, and you obviously got a job to do this weekend and a job to do next weekend. But France should be concerned.
France definitely should be concerned, but they won't be. That's just not the way they are. England, what I will say about this game is, and I know everyone says, and we're as guilty as everyone else of saying, what France will turn up. They're just, that to me still doesn't quite ring true, because they're too consistently poor now. And I know that sounds bad, because the talent they have in their team, they should be double the team they are. So none of these teams have concerned me yet, but let's see what happens. Let's see what happens on Saturday against Argentina, and how we go, and then let's look at what France are doing and see. We'll see how much worry we've got following that. Yeah.
Well, look, the big thing for England on Saturday is that an England win guarantees them a quarter-final.
Yes, it does. Yeah, absolutely. So let's
obviously,
get that.
Obviously, we want to win the group, or do we? No, we do. We want to be unbeaten. We want to be unbeaten.
We want to be unbeaten.
I think that's more valuable. But yeah, a win, however it comes on Saturday, guarantees a quarter-final. So that is goal number one. Obviously, a bonus point would be great, and I genuinely think that there's a bonus point on offer for England in this game. I think the way that Argentina have been playing versus the way that England have been playing, the records and all of this will go into in more depth in the pre-game on Saturday. But I think England have won the last 9 on the bounce against Argentina, and they're in a strong position. So hopefully we go out there, we do a job, we grow a little bit more, like we said, because that's the key here, is just grow with each match. And another 5 points would be absolutely lovely.
It would, and it'd be good to just get that qualification guaranteed. I'm pretty sure we will.
Yeah, why not? Just quickly, Dan, then, I know we're going to go into the team in more detail on Saturday, but a couple of things. No Genge, a.k.a. the Baby Rhino, a.k.a. Juggernaut, but the Big Mac is back. You like what I did there?
I like that. Well played.
As is Jack. You like what I did
Big Mac sounds like a well-known burger, so yeah.
Well, he looks a bit like... No, that's harsh. Yeah, Maka Vunipola comes back. Jack Nowell comes back, both off the bench. It's going to be good to see them.
Yes, it would be amazing to see both of them. I'd love to see Mako and Jack Nowell get a good run out, and Slade, in fairness.
Are we starting to look like a first 15?
I think that is our current, with all the injuries. I know Mako and Nat are back, but they haven't played. I think that is our best 15 currently. I think that's what Eddie considers our best 15.
I had a quick look.
And I think that's what I consider our best 15.
So I had a quick look, and the players that I think are not so much question marks, but the ones that where things differ. You got Joe Cokanasiga has been replaced by Jack Nowell.
Yeah.
Is he for me, he's a part of a 23 when you want the ability to bring someone on that's 120 kilos and can run the 100 in 11 seconds or whatever he can do. But we know how good Jack Nowell is. So I think
Jack Nowell's a better player.
That's probably... I think an out-and-out rugby player, I agree with you. But is this a situational...
Well, that's for players I want on the pitch, for rugby players.
Is this situational? Because I think, Joe Cokanasiga perhaps offers more than Jack Nowell, or, in addition to. You've got Henry Slade on the bench, Jonathan Joseph left out. Jonathan Joseph has looked amazing so far this World Cup and in the warm-ups.
Yeah.
You've got Ellis Genge, who understandably Mako gets the nod ahead of him, but has just become more and more dangerous, and just that one break in the last game.
So I think what we'll do, I think this is a first 15, not a first 23.
True. Yeah, true. So you think it's right? Jonathan Joseph is not first 15. Wilson, Genge, Cokanasiga, none of them first 15.
At the moment, at the moment, I think that yes, possibly. I mean, all of them. It's so arguable. Genge, I don't think is. I think I've got.
I think my only
ahead of him.
My only real kind of argument in this would be Nowell starting on the wing with May and Watson at fullback as a first 15.
Yeah, I don't think Nowell's ready to start. I think
no. I think it's right that he's coming off the bench on Saturday because of the injury and everything else. But in terms of if we were looking at the first 15, injuries aside, I would be tempted to start Watson at fullback and have Nowell and May as the two wingers with Daly on the bench.
Yeah, I get what you're saying.
You're absolutely adamant that Elliot Daly is our fullback, and rightly so, aren't you?
I think Elliot Daly stays as our fullback. I'm not changing that yet.
Let's just hope in this game he appears to want to be in it.
I agree he's not played the best rugby we've seen of him, but I still think Elliot Daly's our fullback.
Fair enough. Well, look, there you go, guys. We've covered some of the bigger games. There have, of course, been other results. The biggies we've talked about, but Scotland got their first win with a
good win against Samoa.
Yeah, 34-0 nilled Samoa, 34-0. France we've obviously talked about. Argentina beat Tonga, Japan beat Ireland, Australia was beaten by Wales. What else happened? Georgia beat Uruguay pretty convincingly.
Fiji had a good win over Georgia this morning.
That was big. New Zealand, interesting, the New Zealand-Canada game, 63-0, and apparently there's been a lot of complaints from New Zealand fans that it was only 63 points. I'm like, what do you actually want them to do? Like,
I think it was like 60 points at 60 minutes or something, and then they just
the last 20 they didn't score. But so what?
Fine,
game was in the bag. It's a pool game, and you've nilled them. Like, almost more valuable to spend that last 20 minutes concentrating on your defence. I think fair play. Like,
get over
certainly
it.
Wouldn't have complaints about it. I think that's just naive as a rugby fan to think that there's any one team that should be scoring more points than that.
Yeah. It's weird. I mean, Ireland-Russia's 21-0 at half-time to Ireland, so this game could still go anyway.
I mean, it sounds like a pretty close one.
It does.
Well, look, maybe we should sign off and go and watch it, because it sounds like it's going to be an absolute nail-biter in the second half.
I think we should. We're back in a couple of days anyway, aren't we?
We are, and we will be going into more depth about the England-Argentina fixture. We'll look back at some of the historical results and we'll look at how both teams have been playing and make our predictions, and hopefully you guys will join us for that. It'll be another one of our semi-live episodes, so you'll get pre, during and post-game analysis. We might even have a little segment from one of our Argentine fans if we can get that arranged in time. But for now, thanks so much for tuning in again, guys. If you've got any questions or comments, if you want to send us your suggestions, your picks for who you would have from the 2003 squad, or anything else that you think would be interesting, or if you've got any similar sorts of questions, things I can pose to Dan on the pod, and we can give those answers, reach out to us at England Rugby Pod on social media, englandrugbypod@gmail.com if you want to email us. And as we say every week, if you get the opportunity, please head over to iTunes, rate us, review us. If it's too difficult, and to be fair, I don't know why iTunes make it so hard to write reviews, ping us them over on an email. We can read them out anyway. We just love to hear what you guys think. We will continue to follow England's progress and the progress of the entire World Cup over the course of the next few weeks, and hopefully you'll be with us throughout. We'll catch you on Saturday morning.
See you then.